Send in the red shirts.
Okay, we had our third episode of Star Trek Discovery. I'm going to say it wasn't a very good episode. I'm just going to say that off the bat. Let's start with some of the smaller things that I didn't like about it. Okay, can you please stop with all the unnecessary camera moves? I don't need to see people walking upside down and then the camera twirls to see them walking right side up. Clearly, you have money in the budget to buy a lot of gimbals. It's not necessary. I mean, they have these things called tripods. It's not necessary for every shot to be moving throughout the scene. I mean, does it have to even move through the teleporter, for God's sake? I've never thought I could get whiplash watching a TV show before.
Range 9,000 kilometers and closing fast.
There's repulsion signatures in the sector. Handle on all frequencies, sir. So far, they haven't responded.
Tell them if they get any closer without telling us who they are, we will activate tactical systems.
I got it.
Oh, well, got anything on scans?
I love the inclusivity of Star Trek, but I don't watch Star Trek to get a Spanish lesson. Commander Vela, I really don't care that your bisabuela is one of the only people you know that still uses monitors. It's a ridiculous line. The only reason the writers put that in the script is to hammer us over the head about how diverse they're being. It's more important to have characters speak like normal human beings than to write them to show how diverse you are trying to be. Let's talk about Michael Burnham for a second. I love Sonequa Martin Green, but I have to be honest and say I'm not really digging her performance this season thus far. It just seems like she delivers most of her lines so overwrought and so overdramatically. It's just distracting.
What else to do? I have no new angles to investigate. Except the one I'm giving you. I just came from Starbase 5. I went to the psychiatric unit. They wouldn't tell me where he was. They wouldn't let me see him. They wouldn't say what was wrong with him. They wouldn't even give me his personal effects. You're his next of kin, and you're a diplomat's wife. So I did the only logical thing. I stole his medical file. It's encrypted.
Outside of the scene where Michael compliments Tilly on winning the marathon, which that in of itself was kind of like some self-affirming bullshit. We know Tilly's a great character, but I'm supposed to believe that she stops for a full, 30 seconds or whatever to talk to this spirit, and yet she still manages to catch up and win the race. I mean, this self-affirmation stuff, it's gotta stop. Michael says before she leaves, Tilly, you're amazing. Oh, that's great. But she's not supposed to be superhuman. But back to Sonequa, it seems like she only has 2 expressions in playing this character. Well, maybe 3. Dour, concerned, and distressed. And some of these scenes, I mean, like the scene where she's talking to Amanda about Spock and his file. Okay, so it's a cause for concern, but it's not something where you have to be, twisting your head and rolling your eyes and this and that. And, sometimes less is more with expressions, with actions. She seems like she's overplaying these lines. And unless I missed something, this is picking up on what I said before about Michael being written to be the savior of all things, a superwoman. When was it established she was a xenoanthropologist? When did that happen? I don't know if you've seen the movie Lady in the Water, an absolutely wretched film by M. Night Shyamalan, one of the worst films I think I've ever seen. And what makes it a bad film is because things happen as the plot moves along so that the plot can move along. I'm going to say that I believe the term is Deus Ex Machina, where things happen so that the plot can move along and advance. It's a solution out of nowhere. And it seems like Michael is becoming that person, and it's making her less and less believable as a character. And then we have the Klingons return. Now, I don't know what it was, but maybe it's because I feel like they've introduced a very interesting and a possible antagonist with the Red Angel. I find that mysterious and compelling. So to bring the Klingons back with all that bullshit was like, I don't want to see this. I'm not interested in this right now. You've got a great arc going right now with the Red Angel. Don't drag the Klingons and their problems, the problematic depiction that you're giving us of Klingons, I'm not interested in that right now. Let's keep on this one track here with the Red Angel. One of the things I don't like about this group of Klingons is that none of them act like Klingons that I'm familiar with. None of them have any honor, and you don't hear them talk about honor. We see a battle scene that just seems contrived out of nowhere, where people get stabbed in the back. Klingons don't do that. Where one Klingon uses a staff of energy to paralyze Ash and Laurel. Never seen that before in the Klingon armory. And it's not something that a Klingon would do. A Klingon wants his enemy with he wants his enemy to have his strongest limbs. He wants his enemy to be at his best or her best, so that if or when they defeat their enemy, they know they did it honorably and they overcame and vanquished a strong foe. And they would sing about it, and they would actually raise the enemy up in some sort of valor out of honor. He was a strong, mighty foe. This guy paralyzes two people, says he's going to kill them. That's not Klingon. I mean, unless his house was just a house of dishonor, and maybe I didn't catch that. Still, I think it was Laurel who stabbed someone in the back, and that's not how Klingons operate. But here's the thing I think I realized that I'm just having a problem with. And it existed in season 1, but I'm seeing it, I don't know why. I was able to focus in it on this after watching this episode. It's that I know that this is a serialized Trek. In other words, they don't have as many bottle episodes. What I mean by that is, a bottle episode, you have one storyline, an arc, that takes place over the course of the 45 minutes or 48 minutes, whatever, of that episode. Then the next episode, you move on to another story. Next episode, so on and so forth. Now, DS9, as far as I am aware, is the first Trek to carry arcs over multiple episodes. For example, the Dominion War, the Prophets and the Wormhole. Those were arcs that went over multiple episodes, which was great. Enterprise did the same thing with the Xindi War. So you could say that they kind of started that serial form of storytelling with those two previous series. They're doing it here, but they're doing it in a horrible fashion. It's okay to have serialized storytelling in Star Trek, but that doesn't mean that you cram everything into, or all these different arcs into one episode. What do I mean? Okay, let's tick off a list. First, you have Tilly dealing with this spirit who was bothering her and making her crazy. And to be honest, that was probably the most Trekish of all of the plots that we saw in this episode. There have been a number of times in previous Trek series where a person is being affected by an alien presence. I mean, it's endless, the number of times we've seen that story told in different ways. So in that respect, Tilly's story was very much like the Trek I'm familiar with. The problem is that it's written so overwrought. I mean, that scene on the bridge was so ridiculous. Why would Tilly respond that way? That she would lose total mentality or lose her senses as to where she is. She's on the bridge in the captain's chair, and she doesn't know enough to comport herself. Like, if she speaks out of turn, that it's going to reflect on her. Even in the TNG episode The Survivors, when Deanna was being plagued by the music box, and she was obviously distraught. She didn't yell out at Captain Picard, or seemingly at Captain Picard, "Stop it, you're driving me crazy." She didn't do any of that. She said, "May I excuse myself?" Remember the episode of TNG? I keep referencing TNG because it's the one I'm most familiar with. When it was called Clues, when Data was disobeying Captain Picard's orders, and at one point Captain Picard let Data have it. So we see this scene on the bridge, which was terribly written, where Tilly is not staying within presence of mind, even though she's being plagued, I understand, but she still should realize she could be misinterpreted yelling out like that when she's in the captain's chair. And Captain Pike doesn't say anything like a warning, like, "Tilly, you're out of order," or he just stands there and listens to her and looks at her like she's crazy. Is this new age millennial crap that's leaked into Star Trek? For Tilly to say, "I've purposely avoided sickbay," makes no sense. That bridge scene was just an example of how in today's world we have to give people leeway. We have to give them a wide berth and walk on eggshells. Because even though Tilly was acting out of order for maybe a justifiable reason, she should have had the presence of mind to realize she's on the bridge and excuse herself to go to sickbay instead of making excuses about not going to sickbay, and the entire bridge crew, well, the first officer and the captain should have read her the riot act so that she could then explain what's going on. But I guess this is being written by people who feel like, I can't be held accountable for my actions, even though I have a job to perform. And I'm not going to be responsible for not behaving responsibly by going to see a doctor if something's wrong with me. You just have to accept the fact that I am cranky today, or the fact that I am not in a good mood today. I probably sound like I'm rambling, but it was just such an annoying scene. So anyway, you've got that plot going on in this episode. Then you've got a subplot between Michael and Amanda, where Michael reveals that she did something. She reveals that she did something to Spock, which is why Spock doesn't want to talk to her anymore, which seems like, I don't know, that sounds like an arc that's being ginned up. It doesn't make any sense. I guess we have to see what this Spock is going to be like, because the Spock that I'm familiar with, his emotions have been purged enough that that would not be an issue that he would hold on to for 20 or however odd years that he and Michael lived together as a brother and sister. Then you have the plot of Laurel and Voke and the introduction of their baby. And this subplot had nothing to do with any of the other plots, which I understand. With most of the Trek series, or most series, you have a subplot that doesn't really address the main plot. But this was, you're talking about Klingons and a struggle over the Klingon Empire. Why would you regulate that to a subplot? And why would you regulate that to an arc involving the introduction of a baby between two major characters? Then you have the introduction at the last minute of Georgiou, Emperor Georgiou from the Mirror Universe, and Section 31. I mean, jeez, any one of those plots could have been could have taken up a whole episode. So it's like they feel like in their serialized storytelling, they have to throw everything into 1 hour when they can do a serial form of storytelling and have this episode be about the Klingons. And it ties into the next episode, which is going to involve Section 31. So the bridge is basically Vok in the first episode that will only deal with the Klingons, and how he then bridges into the next episode, which only deals with Section 31, and you still got a serialized form of storytelling with Vok being the bridge. My point being, find some way to bridge each of these episodes and keep a running thread going on, but don't cram everything into 1 hour. It gives the episode a disjointed feel. And here's another major problem I have that I realized in watching this episode. The Discovery writers want us to care about things that we have no stake in. They want us to care about things that we have no attachment to, because the characters or the stories that they create, they haven't developed enough. For example, we know you're going to introduce Spock in this season. So why are you trying to make this about Michael, about something that she did to Spock? I don't care what she did to Spock. At this point, I don't care the way you're building up that there's some friction between Spock and Michael. When you compare Spock and Michael doesn't even rate on the scale. If you're going to introduce Spock, which I am against, but if you're going to do that, why are you trying to make it about Michael and what she did to Spock? I just want to see Spock. It's almost as if the writers are trying to gin something up to justify the making Burnham a relative or a half relative of Spock. It's like, we created this situation. Now we're going to make you care about it by teasing this little nugget about something that Michael did to Spock. When, again, I know Spock better than these writers do. So I don't have any attachment to anything Michael may have done to Spock. So the fact that you're teasing it as though it's something that has us on the edge of our seats, or maybe I should just speak for myself, you're failing. I don't care. Move on from that. You introduce this baby between Laurel and Voke, which is a surprise, comes out of nowhere. But is it really that big a deal? And then the baby becomes the MacGuffin that motivates the war or the fight between the two houses of Klingons. And I don't care. Maybe if this episode if there was an episode that was just about reintroducing us to Voke and Laurel and this baby, and we see something going on with the baby, maybe something along the lines of how Worf and his wife, whose name I forget, she introduces an unknown son, his unknown son, whose name I can't remember, Alexander. Well, see, we spent a whole episode getting to know Alexander, so anything that happens to Alexander we're committed to, we're invested in. Here, you just show us his baby, then you cut to commercial, then the next thing I know, the baby's been kidnapped and there's this war. How can I care about that? I don't know the kid. Why do I care? Oh, and that reminds me about the Klingons being not honorable enough. So Laurel fakes the deaths of her lover, Ash, and her baby to continue to subjugate the Klingon Empire. Then, in the ultimate act of Freudianism, she wants the Klingons to call her mother. What is going on? If this is how the writers are writing the Klingons, please leave the Romulans alone. Please leave them alone. Don't even broach them. And I know you're not going to even think about the Borg for multiple reasons, but I would be upset that you brought them up because they're not in this timeline. But I would be concerned about you bringing them up because you wouldn't know how to write them either. So yeah, we're 3 episodes in, and I think they're going to do, 13 or 16 episodes? Probably 13 episodes. But this one was a clunker as far as I'm concerned. Too much going on, trying to cover too much ground. The fact that Ash is in Section 31, well, that's intriguing. But since I'm just now meeting Georgiou and don't know and there you go. Another thing I'm supposed to be invested in, but I just learned that Georgiou is a member of Section 31. Now, how did that happen? We don't get to know that? That could be an episode in of itself. But not only in the same episode that you've introduced the baby, that you introduced that Burnham did something to Spock. You have a plot line of Tilly having a spore attached to her. Oh, and let me pause for a second to just say this. These writers really are bad at knowing how to prioritize building something up and letting it pay off. So they did this whole thing with the green dot or green spore landing on Tilly, and they zoom in on the camera zooms in on her shoulder. And this is how that pays off. You know, the payoff has to be equal to or bigger than the setup. But getting back to what I was saying, you have all these stories. It makes for a disjointed episode. And the fact that you felt the need to cram all of that into this one episode, I don't know why you felt the need to do that. As I said many times in this already, you know, you can make each one of those stories a more fleshed out episode. The fact that you cram them all into here makes me concerned about how you're going to be writing or how you've written future episodes that we're going to see this season. Okay, that's it. I'm done. There were some good things about it. The Tilly plot, like I said, that was very close to Trek, but it was written for today's audience, I guess. I don't know how to say that, but very disappointing. I didn't like it that much. But let me know what you think. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Tell me why. All right, well, I sincerely hope I have a better experience next week watching Star Trek Discovery.